The first thing you learn when you step onto a space station is that no one looks you in the eye. It's not rudeness, it's survival. In a place crowded with hundreds of species, some take eye contact as a death threat, others as a marriage proposal. Me? I'm just a human trying to mind my own business, which is harder than it sounds in Confluence Station. My name is Ella Shepard, former station security, current hired muscle for a research vessel called the Lofty Ambitions. Not the career path I imagined growing up on Earth, but life has a way of revising your plans, especially when your sister's medical bills stack higher than the old skyscrapers back home. The hangar deck of Confluence stretched before me like a mechanical digestive tract, all gleaming metal and hissing hydraulics. Massive cargo containers moved on automated tracks, while customs officers in crisp blue-gray uniforms scrutinized every crate and passenger with equal suspicion. Above us, the transparent artery of the main walkway carried the station's lifeblood, travelers, traders, and trouble, all flowing together in one chaotic current. I checked my wrist pad again. 4 hours until departure. Enough time to finish the security sweep of the Lofty Ambitions and maybe grab something to eat that didn't come from a synthesizer. The scientists I worked for, Flip and Merrill, were brilliant minds with terrible taste in food supplies. As I approached our docking bay, I noticed a flicker of movement near the cargo hatch. Someone was there, pressed flat against the hull, trying very hard not to be seen. The figure wore a hooded cloak, common enough in the station, but there was something in its posture, the perfect stillness, the calculated angle against scanner sight lines, that spoke of desperation rather than criminal intent. I approached slowly, hand resting casually near my stunner. Docking bay access is restricted. State your business. The figure flinched but didn't run. Slowly, a face appeared from beneath the hood, or what passed for a face. Two large, dark eyes dominated, set wide apart on a narrow skull with textured skin that shifted between deep blues and purples. A vandal. Please. The word came out in accented common, the universal trade language. Need help. Now, here's where most station security would hit their comms and report an unauthorized vandal. They were persona non grata throughout this sector, regarded as thieves, troublemakers, and worse. The official line was that they were a naturally criminal species, but anyone who'd worked security long enough knew that was convenient political fiction. They were just the current underclass, the designated outsiders. I should have called it in. That was protocol. That was what I was paid for. You're in a restricted area, I said instead, keeping my voice neutral. The vandal's skin rippled with anxious color patterns. Know this. No choice. CSO's looking for me. CSO's custom security officers, the station's law enforcement arm, and they took a particularly dim view of vandals without proper documentation, which meant this one was either undocumented or had broken some station regulation. That sounds like a you problem, I replied, even as my mind calculated odds and escape routes. Old habits. The vandal's shoulders slumped. We'll die here. Or worse. I'd seen the or worse firsthand during my security days. Vandals caught without papers often disappeared into the lower levels of stations like this one, conscripted into labor pools that existed in the shadow of official records. What's your name? I asked, against my better judgment. A pause. Then, Sedestra. Melis. You picked the wrong ship to hide on, Sedestra. This is a research vessel, not a transport. Research. The vandal's head tilted. Scientists, 2 of them. Studying biological linguistics or some such. Not smugglers, if that's what you're hoping for. Sedestra's skin darkened to a deep violet. What I'd learned was a sign of deep thought in vandals. Scientists have travel permits. Official clearance. Yes, and they'd lose all that if caught harboring an illegal immigrant, I countered. Not asking harboring. Just passage. To next port. We'll hide. We'll work. Clean. Anything. It was a bad idea. A terrible idea that could cost me my job, my pay, and potentially my freedom if the CSOs decided to make an example of us. The smart play was to walk away, or better yet, report the stowaway and earn some goodwill with station authority. Instead, I found myself saying, stay here. Out of sight. I need to talk to the ship's owners. Hope flashed across Sedestra's face in ripples of lighter blue. "Thank you, Ellis Human." "Don't thank me yet," I muttered, already regretting my decision as I headed up the gangway into the lofty ambitions. Inside, the ship smelled of disinfectant and the peculiar ionized scent that comes with new tech. Flip and Meryl had spared no expense in outfitting their mobile laboratory, even if they'd skimped on crew quarters and decent food. I found them in a main lab, surrounded by holographic projections of what looked like sound waves being compared to genetic sequences. Dr. Meryl Ashton was hunched over a console, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and perpetually narrowed eyes. Across from her, Dr. Philippa "Flip" Sorensen gestured animatedly, her stocky frame moving with the enthusiasm she brought to everything. "Ellis." Flip beamed when she saw me. "Perfect timing. Tell Meryl that the phonological correlations in the Arcturon dialect clearly map to the chromophore sequences in their skin pigments." "Clearly not," Meryl countered without looking up. "The sample size is statistically insignificant." "I need to talk to you both," I interrupted before they could drag me into their debate. "We have a situation." That got their attention. I laid out the encounter with Sedestra as concisely as possible, ending with, "So there's an undocumented vandal asking for passage to our next port, and CSOs are apparently looking for her." Meryl raised an eyebrow. Their vocal patterns and color expressions read as female to me, but I'm not an expert on vandal biology. I shrugged. "We are," Flip said with sudden interest. "Or we could be. Do you realize we've never had the opportunity to study vandal communication patterns up close? Their chromomorphic expressions are rumored to carry as much linguistic content as their vocalizations." I recognized the gleam in her eye. This isn't a research opportunity. This is a person asking for help, and potentially a serious legal problem for all of us. Of course, Flip nodded, but the scientific excitement didn't dim. "But think about it, Ellis. If we're helping anyway." "We haven't decided we're helping," Meryl interjected, finally looking up from her console. "The legal implications alone." "We have research permits," Flip countered. "We could classify her as a subject." "That's a dangerous ethical line to cross," Meryl frowned. "Using our scientific credentials to circumvent immigration law. More ethical than leaving her to be captured and forced into labor." I asked quietly. A heavy silence fell. I'd worked for the scientists long enough to know their moral compass points. Flip was guided by boundless curiosity tempered with genuine compassion. Meryl by rigorous principle and caution. Both, however, shared a fundamental respect for sentient rights that I was now deliberately leveraging. Meryl sighed. "You're asking us to risk our funding, our careers, and potentially our freedom." "I'm not asking anything," I clarified. "I'm presenting a situation. The decision is yours. I just work here." Another silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft hum of laboratory equipment. "Bring her in," Flip finally said. "Carefully. We'll talk to her at least." Meryl looked like she wanted to object, but instead just shook her head. "If we do this, we do it properly. No half measures that leave us all vulnerable." When I returned to the cargo hatch, Sedestra was exactly where I'd left her, though she'd pressed herself even further into the shadow of a support strut. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Come with me," I said quietly. "Stay close, keep your hood up, and don't speak until we're inside." She nodded and followed with a silent grace that spoke of practice moving unnoticed. We made it through the cargo bay and up to the lab without incident, though my heart rate only returned to normal when the inner door sealed behind us. Sedestra stood uncertainly in the center of the lab, her cloak pulled tight around her slender frame. Under the bright lights, I could see the fabric was worn thin in places, patched and repatched with different materials. Flip approached first, extending her hands palms up in what most species recognized as a non-threatening gesture. "Hello, Sedestra. I'm Dr. Philippa Sorensen, and this is Dr. Meryl Ashton. Ellis tells us you're in some trouble." Sedestra's skin rippled with blue and purple patterns that shifted too rapidly for me to read. "Yes, thank you for seeing me." Why are the CSOs looking for you? Meryl asked, direct as always. Sidestra's colors darkened. No papers. Not allowed to have. We, vandals, must stay in assigned sectors. Work assigned jobs. The words came haltingly, each one carefully formed. I left. Wanted more. Is crime. You're an escaped laborer, Meryl translated flatly. Yes. No. Sidestra's skin flashed with frustration. Not escaped prisoner. Never free to begin. I'd seen this before. Vandals were brought to stations like Confluence as contract laborers, but the contracts were designed to be inescapable. Debts that could never be repaid, clauses that prevented departure. Not technically slavery, but close enough that the distinction mattered only to lawyers and politicians. How long have you been hiding? Flip asked gently. 3 station cycles. Moving place to place. Working when can. Today, CSO scan whole sector. Must leave station now. And you chose our ship because... Meryl prompted. Saw Ellis human. Looked. Sidestra's skin turned a soft, uncertain blue. Kind. I blinked, surprised. I've been called many things in my career, but kind wasn't usually among them. We're scheduled to depart for the Edgefall research post in 4 hours, Flip explained. That's not exactly freedom. It's a remote outpost. Is away from here. Is enough. Sidestra's voice held a certainty that cut through her linguistic struggles. Flip and Meryl exchanged a look I'd come to recognize. Their silent communication perfected over years of partnership. If we do this, Meryl said carefully, there are conditions. You would officially be a research subject studying Vandal communication patterns. That gives us a legal framework for your presence. But, Flip added quickly, it would be entirely voluntary. We would never force you to participate in any research. Would be honor, Sidestra replied, her skin brightening. Can teach. Can help. Have knowledge. And what happens when we reach Edgefall? I asked, the practical concern that neither scientist had addressed. A moment of silence followed. One problem at a time, Sidestra finally answered, with what I could swear was a very human-like shrug beneath her cloak. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Fair enough. With the decision made, we moved quickly. Flip and Meryl created a profile for Sidestra in their research database, backdating her involvement to give the appearance she'd been part of the project before we arrived at Confluence. Recognition. Can't say I have, I replied, grateful that years of security work had taught me to lie convincingly. Though they all look rather similar to me. No offense. None taken, Tenry said with a thin smile. Vermin all look the same, don't they? I fought to keep my expression neutral. Haven't had much interaction with vandals, to be honest. Count yourself lucky. Thieves and troublemakers, the lot of them. This one's been particularly problematic. Stealing, trespassing, even assaulting a citizen who caught it breaking into a storage unit. The way he said citizen made it clear vandals didn't qualify for the designation in his mind. I wonder how much of his account was true and how much was the standard embellishment used to justify harsh treatment of those already marginalized. Well, I'll keep an eye out, I promised, tucking my ID away. We're departing in a few hours, so I doubt it'll be our problem. Tenry's gaze lingered uncomfortably. Research vessel, right? What kind of research? Xenolinguistics, I replied, sticking close to the truth. The relationship between biology and language development across species. Above my pay grade, honestly. Sounds fascinating, he said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Don't suppose your scientists would be interested in adding a vandal to their studies? They're quite primitive communicators. Might make for an interesting contrast to more evolved species. The casual bigotry made my teeth clench, but I forced a non-committal shrug. You'd have to ask them. I just handle security. Of course. He finally stepped back. Safe travels, Shepard. And if you do spot our missing vandal, be sure to report it immediately. They can be dangerous when cornered. Will do, I assured him, gathering my purchases. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back, the persistent gaze of someone whose suspicions had been raised but not quite confirmed. By the time I returned to the lofty ambitions, my shirt was damp with nervous sweat despite the station's carefully regulated temperature. Flip met me at the airlock, her usually cheerful face creased with worry. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, leading me toward the lab. "Departure clearance is being held up. They're insisting on a full manifest review and cargo inspection." "That's not standard procedure for research vessels," I said, a cold weight settling in my stomach. "We have expedited clearance." "Exactly." Flip's normally animated hands were still, a sure sign of her distress. "Meryl's on a call with station administration now, trying to sort it out." Inside the lab, Meryl was indeed engaged in tense conversation with a station official whose holographic projection hovered above the communication console. Her tone was professionally forceful, but I could detect the underlying strain. Completely unprecedented. "Our research permits explicitly exempt us from routine inspection protocols, as you're well aware, Administrator." The administrator, a thin-faced individual of indeterminate species, responded with bureaucratic inflexibility. "These are security measures, Dr. Ashton, not customs procedures. We have reports of a dangerous fugitive attempting to leave the station. All vessels must be searched before departure." "We've been docked for 8 standard days," Meryl countered. "If this fugitive boarded our vessel, it would have shown up in our regular security sweeps." The administrator's expression didn't change. "Nevertheless, the inspection will proceed. A CITSO team will arrive at your docking bay in 30 minutes. Please have all crew present and all compartments accessible." The hologram winked out before Meryl could respond. 30 minutes, she said, turning to us with grim determination. "We need to decide what we're doing." "It's Tenry," I explained quickly. "CITSO officer I ran into at the market. He's hunting Sedestra specifically, and he seems suspicious of me." "Then we need to get her off the ship," Meryl concluded. "We can't risk." "And send her where?" Flip interrupted. "Back to forced labor? Or worse?" "I'm thinking of us too. Philippa," Meryl rarely used Flip's full name. "Of you. Of our work. If we're caught harboring an undocumented alien, that's the end of everything we've built." "I know," Flip's voice softened, "but I can't justify sacrificing her to save ourselves." While they debated, my mind raced through options. The station was too thoroughly monitored for Sedestra to simply disembark and hide elsewhere, especially with an active search underway. But keeping her aboard during an inspection seemed equally impossible. "Unless the research subject angle," I said suddenly. "We commit to it completely." Both scientists turned to me, questioning. "You said you created a profile for her in your database, right? Backdated to before we arrived at Confluence?" Flip nodded. "Yes, but it won't hold up to serious scrutiny. Any investigation would reveal." "We're not facing an investigation yet," I cut in. "Just an inspection." "Where's Sedestra now?" "Still in the storage room," Meryl answered. "Get her out. Clean her up. Put her in proper research subject attire, whatever that looks like for your work. By the time the CSOs arrive, she should be sitting in your lab as an official, documented part of your research team." Flip's eyes widened. "Hide her in plain sight." "Exactly. It's too late to smuggle her out, and too risky to try hiding her on board. But if she's officially here with documentation that predates this security alert, it might work," Meryl admitted reluctantly. "But her comment is limited, and any interaction with the CSOs would." "So she doesn't interact," I said. "She's in the middle of a controlled communication experiment that can't be interrupted. You're measuring her chromomorphic responses to linguistic stimuli or something similarly scientific sounding." A spark of genuine interest lit in Flip's eyes. "We could actually set up such an experiment. It would be fascinating, too." "Focus, Flip," Meryl interjected. "This is about survival, not science." "It can be both," I suggested. "The more authentic it looks, the better our chances." Meryl considered for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Let's do it. Ellis, get Sedestra and explain the plan. Flip, prepare the lab and the documentation. I'll continue trying to expedite our departure clearance through official channels." We moved with urgent efficiency, each to our assigned task. When I entered the storage room, Sedestra was huddled in a corner, her skin a muted gray that I interpreted as anxiety or fear. "Change of plans?" I explained quickly. CSOs are coming to inspect the ship. We're going to present you as an official research subject rather than hiding you. Her colors shifted rapidly. Alarm, confusion, then a deliberate calming in a focused blues. What must do? Come with me. We're going to get you cleaned up and into some different clothes. When the CISOs arrive, you'll be in the lab participating in an experiment. You won't have to speak to them. In fact, it's better if you don't, but you need to appear calm and like you belong here. She rose in one fluid motion. Understand. We'll perform. I led her to the ship's modest refresher unit, showing her how to operate the sonic cleansing system, then provided her with a set of plain garments that Flip had designated as appropriate research attire. While she changed, I stood guard outside, keenly aware of the minutes ticking away. When she emerged, the transformation was striking. Without the concealing cloak and grime of days spent hiding, Sidestra appeared not just cleaner, but somehow more substantial, more present. The simple gray garments with the university insignia that sponsored Flip and Meryl's research lent her an air of legitimacy that even her obvious alien features couldn't diminish. Good, I said with more confidence than I felt. Remember, you've been with the research team for months. This inspection is routine, nothing to worry about. Stay calm, focus on the experiment, and let us handle any questions. Yes, we'll be good subject. Her skin rippled with determined blues and purples. By the time we reached the lab, Flip had transformed it into a scene of focused scientific activity. Holographic displays showed complex patterns that I assumed represented Vandal chromomorphic expressions, while recording devices were positioned to capture Sidestra's responses. Meryl was at her console, appearing deeply engrossed in data analysis. Perfect timing, Flip said brightly, gesturing Sidestra to a seat position before a display screen. We're ready to begin the next phase. Ellis, would you mind monitoring the physiological responses? She was playing it up for Sidestra's benefit, establishing the rhythm and expectations of the charade we were about to perform. I took my position at a monitoring station, pretending to adjust settings while Flip explained the experiment to Sidestra in simplified terms. The ship's communications system chimed. CSO inspection team requesting access at main airlock, the automated voice announced. Authorize entry. Meryl commanded without looking up from her work. Direct them to the main assembly area. We exchanged tense glances. The performance was about to begin. I met the CSO team at the assembly area, deliberately positioning myself as the ship's security officer handling the formalities. There were 3 of them, led by Tenry, whose expression sharpened with recognition when he saw me. Shepard, he nodded. Quite a coincidence. Officer Tenry, I acknowledged. Not really. I'm chief of security for the lofty ambitions. Standard procedure for me to handle inspections. Of course. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll need to see all compartments, all personnel manifests, and interview each crew member. Separately. That last part wasn't standard, and we all knew it. He was fishing, hoping to catch someone in a contradictory statement. The scientists are currently in the middle of a time-sensitive experiment, I said smoothly. But you're welcome to observe. This way, please. I led them through the ship, maintaining a professional demeanor as they conducted their search with methodical thoroughness. Tenry kept close to me, asking casual questions about our research mission, our previous ports of call, our next destination. I answered truthfully where possible, vaguely where necessary. Finally, we reached the lab. Flip and Meryl were orchestrating a convincing tableau of scientific inquiry, with Sidestra seated before a display showing rapidly changing patterns. Her skin rippled in response, the changes recorded by the monitoring equipment. Doctors, I announced formally. The CSO inspection team. Meryl looked up with perfectly calibrated irritation. We're in the middle of a controlled response sequence. Any interruption will compromise the data. Tenry's gaze fixed immediately on Sidestra. What is that Vandal doing here? That, Flip replied with professional crispness, is Subject V7, a key participant in our research on chromomorphic communication patterns. She's been with our program for 11 standard months. Tenry moved closer, scrutinizing Sidestra, who, to her immense credit, maintained her focus on the display, her skin shifting in what appeared to be measured responses to the pattern shown. "I'll need to see documentation," he demanded. "Identification, research permits, the subject's clearances." "Of course," Merrill said, activating a holographic display. "Our research permits are all in order, including authorization for non-citizen research subjects." The documents appeared, impressively official and bearing all the correct authorization codes. I recognized Merrill's handiwork. She had a perfectionist attention to detail that extended to administrative matters. Tenry scanned them carefully, his expression growing increasingly frustrated as he found nothing obviously amiss. "What about the subject's personal identification?" "Research subjects documentation is incorporated into the project permits," Flip explained, highlighting a section of the display. "Their legal status is as research assets, not independent travelers. Standard procedure for the Interstellar Academic Consortium." It was a clever deflection, using bureaucratic language to obscure the fact that Sedestra had no independent legal status. The IAC did indeed sometimes classify research subjects this way, though usually for non-sentient specimens. Tenry wasn't satisfied. "I need to question the subject directly." "Impossible," Merrill stated flatly. "We're measuring baseline chromomorphic responses to controlled stimuli. External interaction would invalidate weeks of calibration." "This is a security matter," Tenry insisted. "I have reason to believe this vandal matches the description of a fugitive we're tracking." "That's absurd," Flip countered. "V7 has been with our research team since before we arrived at Confluence. Check the documentation timestamps." Tenry's jaw tightened. Documentation can be falsified. A dangerous moment stretched between them. Then Merrill sighed theatrically. "Officer Tenry, perhaps we can accommodate your concerns without completely derailing our research." She activated her communication panel. "Administrator Voss? This is Dr. Merrill Ashton. I have a situation requiring your intervention." A moment later, the holographic projection of the same administrator I'd seen earlier appeared above the console. "Dr. Ashton, what seems to be the problem?" "The CSO inspection team is insisting on interrupting a controlled experiment to interrogate one of our research subjects. I've explained our IAC permits and the subject status, but they're persisting, given the time-sensitive nature of our work." The administrator looked displeased. "Officer Tenry, is this correct?" Tenry straightened. "Administrator, we have reason to believe their research subject may be the undocumented vandal we've been tracking. I'm simply doing my duty. By harassing licensed researchers with proper documentation," the administrator asked coldly. "The Interstellar Academic Consortium funds 30% of this station's operational budget. We do not impede their work without substantial cause. Sir, with respect, a visual match is insufficient." The administrator cut him off. "If you have concrete evidence that contradicts their documentation, present it. Otherwise, complete your inspection without further disruption." Tenry's face hardened, but he nodded stiffly. "Yes, Administrator." After the hologram disappeared, Tenry gave us all a long, calculated look. "We'll complete our inspection of the remaining areas. I assume there will be no objection to that." "None whatsoever," I replied, gesturing toward the door. "This way to the engine compartment." The rest of the inspection proceeded in tense silence. I could practically feel Tenry's suspicion radiating from him, but without concrete evidence. He was constrained by protocol and his superior's directive. When they finally departed, I maintained my professional demeanor until the airlock sealed behind them. Then I sagged against the wall, exhaling a breath I felt I'd been holding for hours. "That was too close," I muttered when I rejoined the others in the lab. Sedestra's colors had shifted to an anxious gray-purple. "Officer knows. We'll return." "Maybe," Merrill acknowledged. "But our departure clearance just came through. We'll be leaving Confluence in 40 minutes. And if they try to stop us?" I asked. "They won't," Flip said with unusual confidence. "I messaged my contact at the consortium while you were finishing the inspection. Our research is now flagged as Priority Alpha in the station system. Even station security can't override that without approval from sector headquarters." I I raised an eyebrow, impressed. For all their academic focus, my employers occasionally revealed surprising levels of political savvy. So we're really doing this, I said, taking her with us. Subject V. 7 is an essential component of our research, Meryl replied formally, then allowed herself a small smile. Besides, I'm rather curious to see what we might actually learn about vandal communication patterns. Sedestra's skin brightened to a vivid blue I'd never seen before. Thank you. All. Don't thank us yet, I cautioned. We're not clear until we're in deep space. 40 minutes later, the lofty ambitions detached from Confluence Station's docking clamps. As we watched the massive structure recede through the observation viewport, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. We'd done it. Against considerable odds, we'd managed to smuggle Sedestra off the station right under the noses of those hunting her. My relief was short-lived. Captain, the ship's AI announced, we are being hailed by a station security vessel. They are requesting that we maintain position for additional inspection. Flip and Meryl exchanged alarmed glances. On screen, Meryl commanded. The viewport image shifted to show a small patrol craft moving to intercept our position. And on the communication screen, Tenry's face appeared, now wearing an expression of grim triumph. Lofty ambitions, this is CSO Tenry. Our records indicate a discrepancy in your research documentation that requires immediate verification. Power down your drive and prepare for boarding. Meryl's response was admirably composed. Officer Tenry, we have received no notification of any documentation discrepancies from station administration. Our departure was fully authorized. New information has come to light, Tenry replied. I am authorized to conduct this follow-up inspection. Comply immediately or face sanctions. It was a bluff. It had to be. If he'd actually found evidence contradicting our story, he would have stopped us before we left the station. But now, away from the immediate oversight of his superiors, he was making one last attempt to confirm his suspicions. Let me handle this, I murmured to Meryl, who nodded and stepped aside. I moved into view of the communication screen. Officer Tenry, this is Ellis Shepard, Chief of Security. We are on a priority research mission with time-sensitive materials aboard. Any delay could compromise weeks of work. If you have specific concerns, I suggest you forward them to the Interstellar Academic Consortium for review. Tenry's eyes narrowed. This is not a request, Shepard. It's an order. Station security protocol allows for follow-up inspections within departure jurisdiction. An IAC protocol allows for uninterrupted transit of priority research vessels. I countered, bluffing as confidently as he was. You've already conducted a thorough inspection. Unless you have a specific warrant citing evidence of wrongdoing, we're not obligated to submit to another. For a tense moment, we stared at each other through the communication link. Then something shifted in his expression, a hardening of resolve. Very well. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be treated as a criminal act, Tenry stated, his voice carrying the weight of a threat. I turned to Meryl, muting our transmission. He's overstepping his authority, but that won't matter if he gets on board. Can they physically stop us? Flip asked, her usual enthusiasm replaced by focused concern. Their patrol craft has maneuvering thrusters that could theoretically latch onto our hull, I explained. Not to mention disabling weaponry if they decide to escalate. Meryl's jaw tightened. We are not submitting to another inspection based on his personal vendetta. She unmuted the transmission. Officer Tenry, we are filing a formal complaint with station administration regarding harassment. Your first inspection was thorough and revealed no issues. We have priority clearance, and your priority clearance has been temporarily suspended pending investigation. Tenry interrupted. You have 2 minutes to power down your drives before we take action. The transmission cut, leaving us staring at each other in the sudden silence. He's bluffing, I said, though without complete confidence. He doesn't have the authority to suspend IAC clearance. Bluff or not, that patrol craft is moving into intercept position, Flip observed, pointing at the tactical display. Sedestra, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. My fault. Should leave. Use escape pod. Absolutely not, Merrill replied with surprising firmness. That's precisely what he wants. My mind raced through options, none of them good. Submit to boarding and hope our documentation held up to further scrutiny. Attempt to outrun the patrol craft. Both carried significant risks. Then Flip straightened suddenly. I have an idea. Her fingers flew across the console, accessing the ship's communication system. Transmitting now on IAC emergency frequency. What are you? Merrill began, but Flip held up a hand. This is Dr. Philippus Sorensen of the research vessel Lofty Ambitions. She spoke clearly into the recorder. We are being illegally detained by Confluence Station security despite full clearance for our priority research mission. Our unique biological specimens are at risk. Requesting immediate intervention under Protocol Theta 9. She ended the transmission and turned to us with a tight smile. Protocol Theta 9 is the IAC emergency code for politically motivated interference with scientific research. Will it work? I asked. Possibly. The consortium takes academic freedom very seriously, especially when expensive research is at risk. And calling in an emergency like this automatically generates records that station administration will have to address. But will it work fast enough? Merrill pressed, eyeing the approaching patrol craft. Only one way to find out, Flip replied, turning back to the main console. Captain, initiate evasive pattern Delta. Use minimal thrust to maintain distance without appearing to flee. Acknowledged. The ship's AI responded, and I felt the subtle shift as the Lofty Ambitions began a series of gentle maneuvers, just enough to prevent easy boarding, but not enough to constitute clear defiance. The patrol craft adjusted its approach, clearly attempting to match our movements. The tactical display showed it closing distance gradually but steadily. 1 minute until they're within grappling range, I reported, tension knotting in my stomach. The communication system chimed again. We all froze, expecting Tenry's angry face. Instead, the holographic projection showed an elegant Arcturian in formal administrative attire. Research vessel Lofty Ambitions. This is Senior Administrator Valerian of the Interstellar Academic Consortium. We have received your emergency transmission and are intervening. Please stand by. The image shifted to a split screen, with Tenry appearing alongside the administrator. The CSO's expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the tightness around his eyes. Officer Tenry, the administrator began in a tone of ice-cold formality. I understand you are attempting to board a vessel under IAC protection after already completing a thorough inspection at the station. Explain yourself. Tenry straightened. Administrator, we have reason to believe this vessel is transporting an undocumented alien, a fugitive from station justice. The initial inspection raised suspicions that require follow-up. What specific evidence do you have that contradicts their documented research status? The administrator asked. A slight hesitation. Visual identification suggests one of their so-called research subjects matches a fugitive vandal we've been tracking. Visual identification, the administrator repeated flatly. Of a vandal. By human officers. The contempt in their tone was subtle but unmistakable. Are you familiar with the documented limits of cross-species identification, Officer Tenry, or the specific IAC protocols regarding research subjects? With respect, Administrator, station security has jurisdiction within departure space, and the consortium has jurisdiction over its research vessels and personnel, the administrator cut in smoothly. Unless you have specific, documentable evidence of criminal activity, not suspicions, not visual similarities, but evidence, you will stand down immediately. The tension stretched for several heartbeats before Tenry's shoulders dropped fractionally. We have no documentation beyond the visual match, Administrator. Then you have no grounds for interference. Return to station and file your concerns through proper channels. The Lofty Ambitions is cleared to proceed to its destination. The administrator's tone left no room for argument. Tenry's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. Understood, Administrator. Both images disappeared, and we watched on the tactical display as the patrol craft broke off its approach and began returning to the station. A collective exhalation seemed to fill the bridge. Flip's face broke into a wide grin of relief, while Meryl's expression remained carefully controlled despite the loosening of tension around her eyes. That, I said into the silence, was impressively well-connected. Flip shrugged with a hint of her usual enthusiasm returning. The consortium protects its own, especially when millions in research funding are at stake. Sedestra's skin had shifted to a bright, vibrant blue that seemed to pulse with relief. Thank you. All risk much for me. Don't thank us yet, Meryl cautioned, though her tone had softened. We're not in the clear until we reach Edgefall. But we're a lot closer than we were 10 minutes ago, Flip added, her optimism irrepressible. Captain, resume course for Edgefall. Maximum sustainable speed. Acknowledged, the AI replied. Estimated arrival in 63 hours. As the stars streaked past the viewport, signaling our transition to faster-than-light travel, I felt the adrenaline of the confrontation begin to ebb, leaving behind the weight of what we'd just done. We had successfully smuggled Sedestra off Confluence Station, defied station security, and invoked high-level intervention from the consortium. There would be consequences, undoubtedly. Tenry didn't strike me as the type to let this go. But for now, we had bought ourselves time and distance. And for someone in Sedestra's position, that was a precious commodity indeed. I glanced at her, standing uncertainly in the center of the bridge, her skin still rippling with what I interpreted as a mixture of relief and anxiety. You should rest, I suggested. It's been a stressful day, and we have a long journey ahead. She nodded, the translator catching her soft words. Yes. Thank you, Ellis Human. As she left the bridge, Flip turned to me with curious eyes. Ellis Human. I shrugged. Cultural thing, I think. Species identifier. Interesting, she mused. Most Vandals I've encountered use human as a slight pejorative. The personal name attachment suggests respect. Or she's just being polite to the people helping her escape, I pointed out. Either way, Meryl interjected, practical as always. We need to consider our next steps. Reaching Edgefall doesn't solve all our problems. One crisis at a time, Flip replied, patting her partner's shoulder. We've survived this one. Let's enjoy that before we start worrying about the next. Despite my professional instinct to plan for all contingencies, I found myself agreeing with Flip. We had taken an enormous risk today. For a stranger, for principles, for reasons I wasn't entirely sure I understood myself. Whatever came next, we had at least given Sedestra a chance she wouldn't have had otherwise. As I headed to my quarters for some much-needed rest, I sent a brief message to my sister back on Earth, encrypted through the consortium's secure channels. Nothing specific, nothing that could be traced or used against us if intercepted. Just a simple reassurance, still on track. Taking the scenic route. Hope the treatments are helping. Her response came quickly, suggesting she was having one of her better days. Scenic route sounds nice. Doctors talking about a new approach. Expensive but promising. Take care of yourself out there in the big empty. I stared at her words for a long moment. The new approach meant higher medical bills, which meant I needed this job more than ever. Yet here I was, risking it all for a Vandal I barely knew. My sister would approve, though. She always did have a stronger moral compass than me. With that thought, I finally allowed myself to sleep, the gentle hum of the ship's engines carrying us farther from danger with each passing moment. The next ship's cycle found us settled into an uneasy routine. Flip had enthusiastically embraced the charade of studying Vandal communication, turning it into actual research with Sedestra's willing participation. Meryl maintained a more cautious distance, but couldn't entirely hide her scientific curiosity. And I divided my time between standard security duties and keeping a watchful eye on our long-range scanners, alert for any sign of pursuit. Sedestra herself seemed to be adjusting to her new circumstances with remarkable adaptability. Free from the constant fear of capture that had defined her existence on Confluence, she revealed herself to be observant, quick-witted, and possessed of a wry humor that occasionally broke through her linguistic limitations. I found her in what had become her unofficial workspace in the lab, surrounded by Flip's recording equipment as she demonstrated a complex pattern of chromomorphic expressions. This means warning, but subtle, she explained as her skin rippled with dark purples edged in vibrant orange. Like, be careful, danger possible, not certain. Flip was recording everything with undisguised fascination. And is this a natural communication or a learned convention? Both. Born with colors, learn meanings from. Community. Sedestra's English was improving daily, though still halting. Different groups, different dialects of color. I leaned against the doorway, watching the exchange with interest. Like many humans, I'd always perceived vandals as inscrutable, their alien biology a barrier to understanding. Now I was beginning to recognize patterns in Sedestra's color changes, to associate certain ripples and hues with specific emotions or intentions. She noticed me, and her skin brightened briefly, a flash of recognition and welcome that I'd come to identify. Ellis human. Good cycle to you. Just Ellis is fine, I replied, a correction I'd made several times without success. How's the research going? Fascinating. Flip answered before Sedestra could speak. Did you know vandals can perceive and reproduce over 300 distinct color gradients? The linguistic implications are enormous. I'll take your word for it, I said with a smile. Any word from the consortium about our situation? Flip's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Nothing new. They're maintaining our clearance and priority status, but... She glanced at Sedestra, then back to me with a meaningful look. I nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. The consortium was protecting us professionally, but they couldn't or wouldn't address Sedestra's legal status indefinitely. Eventually, we would need a more permanent solution. Any sign of pursuit? Flip asked quietly. Nothing so far, I assured her. We're well outside Confluence jurisdiction now, and our course doesn't cross any major security checkpoints before Edgefall. Good, she nodded, then turned back to her work with renewed focus. Sedestra was just showing me how vandal color patterns can convey temporal concepts. I left them to their research, continuing my rounds through the ship. In the main laboratory, I found Merrill deeply absorbed in analyzing data, barely acknowledging my presence with a distracted nod. Everything okay? I asked, pausing by her workstation. She glanced up, her expression troubled. I've been reviewing our options at Edgefall. And they're limited, she admitted. Edgefall is a research outpost, not a port of entry. There's no immigration authority, no asylum process. Sedestra would have no official status there beyond being our research subject, which means she'd be just as vulnerable as at Confluence if anyone questioned her presence, I concluded. Precisely. Merrill leaned back, rubbing her eyes. We've bought our time and distance, but not a solution. I considered this. What about your consortium contacts? They intervened once already. The consortium protects its researchers and its investment, not stowaways, even those disguised as research subjects. She shook her head. They stepped in against Tenry because he was interfering with legitimate research without proper authority. That doesn't mean they'd support us harboring an undocumented alien indefinitely. So we're back where we started. I sighed. Not quite. Merrill tapped her console, bringing up a star chart. I've been looking at our options beyond Edgefall. There's a frontier settlement in the next sector, Nova Haven. It's outside Confluence jurisdiction, minimal security presence, and they don't ask too many questions about newcomers willing to work. I studied the chart. That's well beyond our planned research route. Yes, but not impossibly so. We could potentially arrange transport for Sedestra from Edgefall to Nova Haven. At considerable expense, I noted. Yes, Merrill met my eyes directly, which raises the question of how far we're willing to go to help someone who was, until recently, a complete stranger. It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since the moment I decided not to report Sedestra back at the docking bay. Why had I taken such a risk for someone I didn't know? Why were Flip and Merrill continuing to do so, potentially jeopardizing careers they'd spent decades building? She deserves a chance, I said finally. After what she's been through, what her people have been through, someone needs to stand up and say it's not right. Merrill studied me thoughtfully. That's commendably principled, Ellis. But principles have costs. Are you prepared for those? The question hung between us, unanswered because I wasn't sure I knew the answer myself. Before I could formulate a response, the ship's alarm system activated. Proximity alert, the AI announced. Unknown vessel approaching on intercept course. Meryl and I exchanged alarmed glances before rushing to the bridge, where Flip was already bringing up the tactical display. Configuration unknown, she reported as we entered. Definitely not a standard patrol craft from Confluence. Military? I asked, scanning the readouts. Negative. Size and power signature suggest a mid-range private vessel. Possibly a courier or light freighter. Sedestra had followed us to the bridge, her skin a muted gray of anxiety. They followed. We don't know that, I told her, though the timing was certainly suspicious. Hail them, standard commercial greeting. Flip sent the hail, but there was no response. The unknown vessel continued its approach, matching our velocity precisely. They're scanning us, Meryl noted with growing concern. Comprehensive sweep, hull composition, power systems, life signs. Not friendly behavior, I murmured, mentally cataloging our limited defensive options. The Lofty Ambitions was a research vessel, not a warship. We had standard shields for debris protection and minimal point defense systems, but nothing that would deter a determined attacker. Should we run? Flip asked, her hand hovering over the engine controls. I shook my head. They're matching our speed too precisely. Likely faster and more maneuverable than we are. The communication system activated suddenly, an incoming transmission forcing its way through our standard filters. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a human face that made my blood run cold. Research vessel Lofty Ambitions. Tenry greeted us with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. What a fortunate coincidence. Officer Tenry, Meryl acknowledged coldly. This is far outside Confluence jurisdiction. What's your business here? Former Officer Tenry, actually, he corrected with a hint of bitterness. Your consortium friends made quite an impression on station administration. My pursuit of a dangerous fugitive was deemed overzealous. That explained how he'd managed to follow us. He was no longer constrained by official protocols or reporting requirements. Then you have no authority whatsoever, I pointed out. You're just a civilian harassing a registered research vessel. Authority? He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Out here, the only authority that matters is who has the bigger guns. And while your pretty research ship might impress academics, it's rather lacking in that department. A chill ran through me. He was right. Beyond established jurisdictions, space was still largely a frontier where might often determined right. What do you want, Tenry? Meryl demanded. Simple. Hand over the Vandal, and I'll be on my way. We have no obligation to surrender any member of our crew to you. Flip responded, her usual cheerfulness replaced by steely resolve. Crew. Tenry's smile widened unpleasantly. Interesting definition. But I have evidence that your crew member is actually an escaped laborer with outstanding criminal charges. Manufactured charges, I countered, though I had no way of knowing if that was true. The courts will decide that, he replied smoothly. Once I return her to Confluence. Sedestra had moved back from the holographic display, but not quickly enough. Tenry spotted her, his eyes narrowing. There you are, fugitive. Your little escape attempt has caused me considerable inconvenience. Sedestra's skin darkened to a deep, angry purple I hadn't seen before. Not fugitive. Was prisoner. Never crime. Save it for the magistrate. Tenry dismissed her. You have 1 hour to prepare her for transfer, or I'll be forced to take more direct action. The transmission cut abruptly. We stood in stunned silence for a moment before Meryl broke it. Options? She asked, looking between Flip and me. Limited, I admitted. His ship outclasses ours in speed and likely armament. We can't outrun him, and we can't outfight him. We could call the consortium again, Flip suggested. Too far out for real-time communication. Meryl shook her head. And even if we could reach them, what would we say? That we're being harassed by a private citizen outside any jurisdiction? They might sympathize, but they couldn't intervene directly. So we're on our own, I concluded grimly. Transfer me. Sedestra's voice cut through our deliberations. Not worth risk to you. We all turned to her in surprise. Her skin had settled into a determined blue, with occasional ripples of darker color that betrayed her fear despite her resolute words. Absolutely not, Flip said immediately. We're not handing you over to that man. He will attack ship, Sedestra insisted. Hurt you. All because of me. We knew the risks when we helped you, Meryl replied with unexpected gentleness. We're not abandoning you now. I studied the tactical display, mind racing through scenarios, none of them promising. Then a detail caught my attention, a subtle anomaly in the sensor readings from Tenry's ship. Wait, I said slowly. Something's off about his ship configuration. Flip looked at the readings. What do you see? The power distribution. It's fluctuating in the weapons systems, and the hull composition readings are inconsistent. I pointed to the relevant data points. I think he's bluffing, at least partially. That's not a combat vessel. It's a standard transport with some modifications. Threatening, but not as dangerous as he wants us to believe. Are you certain? Meryl asked. Not completely, I admitted, but I spent years analyzing vessel signatures in station security. The patterns are familiar. Even if a ship isn't military grade, it could still overpower our defenses, Flip pointed out. True, I acknowledged, but it changes the equation. He's counting on intimidation because his actual options may be nearly as limited as ours. A spark of hope kindled in the atmosphere of the bridge. If Tenry's advantage wasn't as overwhelming as he'd implied, perhaps we had more options than immediate surrender. What do you suggest? Meryl asked. I considered for a moment. We stall. Tell him we need more time to prepare Sedestra for transfer. Meanwhile, we alter course toward Edge Fall's outer beacons. Once we're within range, we can transmit an emergency distress call. The outpost has a security detachment, small, but enough to make Tenry think twice about open aggression. And if he doesn't wait? Flip pressed. If he attacks before we reach beacon range, then we use what we have, I replied grimly. The ship's point defense systems weren't designed for combat, but they can be repurposed. And the research equipment in the cargo bay includes some pretty powerful electromagnets that could potentially disrupt his systems if we get creative. Meryl studied me with newfound respect. You've been thinking about this contingency. I shrugged. It's my job to consider security risks. This is an extreme case, but the principles are the same. It's a gamble, Flip said softly. So, was helping Sedestra in the first place, I reminded her. Sometimes principles require risk. Sedestra had been watching our exchange intently, her color patterns shifting as she processed our words. Will fight for me? Why? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Why were we risking so much for her? Professional ethics? Moral principles? Human compassion? Perhaps all of these, and something more fundamental. Recognition that in a vast, often hostile universe, standing together against injustice was not just right, but necessary. Because it's the right thing to do, Flip answered simply. Because no one deserves to be treated as less than a person, Meryl added. I nodded in agreement. And because sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Sedestra's skin rippled with a complex pattern I couldn't interpret, but her next words were clear. Then I stand with you too. Not hide. Fight. With our resolve strengthened, we set about preparing for the confrontation ahead. I worked with the ship's systems to optimize our defenses, while Flip and Meryl gathered equipment from the lab that might be repurposed for our protection. Sedestra assisted where she could, her determination evident in every movement. When the hour Tenry had given us expired, we were ready, not confident, but prepared to resist rather than surrender. The communication system chimed with his incoming transmission. His expression had hardened from smug confidence to irritation. Your time is up. Where's the vandal? Meryl stepped forward, composure perfect. We need additional time to complete the necessary preparations for transfer. Our research subject requires specific environmental conditions for transport, as outlined in IAC Protocol 47B regarding the handling of sensitive biological specimens. It was scientific double talk designed to sound official while buying us precious minutes as we edged closer to Edgefall's beacon range. Tenri wasn't fooled. "You're stalling. We're following protocol," Merrill countered smoothly. "Unless you'd prefer to explain to the authorities how you damaged valuable research by forcing a rush transfer." His eyes narrowed. "You have 15 minutes. Not 1 second more." The transmission cut. "Beacon range?" I asked immediately. Flip checked the navigation system. 22 minutes at current speed. "Not enough?" I grimaced. "Can we increase velocity without making it obvious?" "Marginally." She adjusted the controls. "But he's matching our every move. He'll notice any significant change." "Do it anyway," I decided. "Every minute closer improves our chances." The tense countdown began. I monitored Tenri's ship, watching for any sign that he was preparing to attack rather than wait. 10 minutes passed, then 12. We were pushing the engines as much as we dared without overtly fleeing, try to close the gap to beacon range. At exactly 15 minutes, Tenri hailed us again. "Time's up. Begin transfer procedures immediately, or I will take action." "We're preparing the airlock now," Merrill assured him, the lies smooth and convincing. "Stand by for docking instructions." "No docking," he countered. "Use your auxiliary craft. The Vandal comes alone." This was a problem. We'd planned to potentially disable his systems during a docking procedure. A separate craft transfer eliminated that option. "Our auxiliary craft is undergoing maintenance," I improvised. "Docking is the only option." Tenri's expression darkened. "More delays. More excuses. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." He turned to someone off-screen. "Target their propulsion systems. Warning shot only." Before we could respond, a bright flash appeared on the tactical display, and the ship shuddered as energy weapons impacted our rear shields. "Shields at 78%, the AI reported calmly. "Minor damage to port thruster assembly." "That was your only warning," Tenri stated coldly. "The next shot disables your engines completely. Transfer the Vandal now." We exchanged grim looks. Our gamble had failed. We were still 7 minutes from beacon range, and Tenri had just demonstrated both the will and capability to attack. But as the saying goes, sometimes when you're out of options, you find new ones. "Ellis," Flip said suddenly, "the experimental comm array. Could we repurpose it?" I caught her meaning instantly. The specialized communication equipment they used for deep space xenolinguistic research operated on frequencies most standard vessels weren't shielded against. "Possibly," I nodded. "It would need to be reconfigured, but it might create enough interference to disrupt their targeting systems." "Do it," Merrill decided. To Tenri, she said, "We're complying. Preparing for transfer now. Please stand by." His suspicious expression suggested he didn't entirely believe us, but he nodded curtly. "Standing by. Any further delays will be met with force." As the transmission ended, we moved with urgent purpose. Flip and I raced to the auxiliary lab where the experimental communication array was housed, while Merrill and Sedestra remained on the bridge to maintain the illusion of compliance. "Will this actually work?" Flip asked as we frantically reconfigured the array's emitters. "In theory," I replied, not slowing my work. "The frequencies should penetrate standard commercial shielding and create enough electromagnetic interference to temporarily disrupt their systems. It won't disable them permanently, but it might give us the edge we need to reach beacon range. And if it doesn't," I met her eyes briefly. "Then we tried our best." We completed the modifications in record time and established a remote link to the bridge. "Ready," I reported to Merrill. "On your mark." "Tenri's getting impatient," she warned. "He's threatening to fire again if we don't begin transfer in the next 60 seconds. Beacon range. Still 4 minutes out." I took a deep breath. "We need to act now. Activate the array on my count." To Flip, I added, "Be ready to divert all available power to engines the moment their systems show disruption." She nodded, fingers poised over the controls. I began the countdown. 3, 2, 1, now. Merrill activated the modified array from the bridge. Immediately, the ship's sensors registered a massive burst of electromagnetic energy directed at Tenri's vessel. For a heartbeat, nothing seemed to happen. Then the tactical display showed the telltale flickering of disrupted systems aboard the other ship. Go! I shouted, and Flip diverted power to the engines. The lofty ambitions surged forward, acceleration pressing us back against the bulkheads as we raced toward beacon range. Their weapons systems are offline, Merrill reported from a bridge. Navigation appears compromised as well. They're falling behind. A surge of hope coursed through me. It was working. Our improvised countermeasure had bought us the precious minutes we needed. Time of beacon range? I asked as we rushed back to the bridge. 1 minute 50 seconds at current speed, Merrill answered. But Tenry's systems are already beginning to recover. He's adjusting course to pursue. Can he catch us before we reach the beacons? It will be close, she admitted. Very close. We watched the tactical display with tense focus as the distance to beacon range steadily decreased, while Tenry's ship gradually closed the gap behind us. The race would indeed be measured in seconds. Beacon range in 30 seconds, Flip announced. Preparing emergency broadcast. Tenry's weapons are back online, Merrill warned. He's targeting our engines again. Evasive maneuvers, I ordered. Maintain course toward the beacon, but make us a harder target. The ship began a series of irregular movements, just enough to complicate targeting without significantly slowing our approach to the beacon. On the tactical display, I could see Tenry adjusting his aim, trying to compensate for our evasions, currently contained by secondary security protocols. Flip studied the technical readout. It's sophisticated, designed to bypass standard research vessel security and transmit internal data back to its source. Probably trying to gather evidence about Sidestra. Can we remove it? I asked. Not without EVA, Merrill shook her head. And we can't risk that while Tenry is still in weapons range. Sidestra stepped forward, her skin darkening with concern. He wants proof to show I am here. Exactly, I nodded grimly. If he can confirm you're aboard with solid evidence, he might escalate despite Edgefall Security's warnings. The tactical display updated, showing the security response craft from Edgefall closing distance rapidly. 6 minutes until they reached us. We just needed to hold out a little longer. The device is attempting a system breach, the AI announced. Targeting crew manifest database. Counter-intrusion measures? Merrill asked. Engaged and holding. However, the device is adaptive. Estimated time to security failure. For minutes, 20 seconds. For minutes, to shy the time we needed for Edgefall Security to reach us. If the device accessed our systems and transmitted Sidestra's presence back to Tenry, he might decide a final desperate attack was worth the risk. We need to disable it, I decided. Without EVA. Flip's eyes lit with sudden inspiration. The sample cleansing system in the cargo bay. It generates a targeted electromagnetic pulse for sterilizing sensitive biological materials. Would it reach the hull section? Merrill asked. If we reconfigure it and boost the power, possibly, Flip replied. But it would mean diverting energy from our already compromised shields. A calculated risk. Weaken our defenses temporarily to neutralize the immediate threat. Do it, I nodded. But be ready to restore shield power immediately if Tenry makes a move. Flip and Merrill hurried to make the necessary adjustments while I kept watch on our pursuer. Sidestra remained beside me, her skin shifting through anxious patterns of deep blue and violet. 3 minutes to security failure. The AI updated dispassionately. Status on the EM pulse? I called. Charging. Flip's voice came through the comm. 87%. We've reconfigured the emitter to target hull section 23. Tenry's ship is changing position. I warned, watching the tactical display. Maneuvering to port side, possibly trying to get a cleaner shot at our engines. Pulse charged, Merrill reported. Ready on your mark. 2 minutes 30 seconds to security failure. I took a deep breath. Fire. A subtle vibration ran through the ship as the electromagnetic pulse discharged, directed at the section of hull where Tenry's device had attached. For a moment, nothing happened. Device status? I asked. Scanning. The AI replied. No electronic signature detected from the foreign device. Communications attempt neutralized. Relief flooded through me. Restore shield power. Edgefall security craft. 3 minutes to intercept, Flip announced as she returned to the bridge. We're going to make it. But I kept my eyes on Tenry's ship, suspicion keeping my relief in check. He wouldn't have come this far, risked this much, only to give up now. What was his next move? The answer came moments later as his ship suddenly accelerated toward us. He's on an intercept course, I shouted. Evasive action. The lofty ambitions responded sluggishly, our damaged engines struggling to execute the maneuver. Tenry's ship closed rapidly, angling not toward our engines this time, but directly amidships toward the main airlock. He's going to attempt manual boarding, I realized aloud. A last desperate attempt before security arrives. Can we outrun him? Meryl asked. I shook my head. Not with our engine damage. He'll reach us before the security craft can intercept. Then we stand and fight, Flip said with unexpected steel in her voice. We've come too far to surrender now. I nodded, already calculating. Seal all internal bulkheads. We'll defend the main airlock. That's his only viable entry point with our current orientation. We moved quickly, Meryl and Flip gathering what makeshift weapons we could muster, mostly lab equipment that could deliver an electrical charge or chemical deterrent. I retrieved the stunner from my quarters, a standard security model that I'd hoped never to use. Sedestra insisted on joining us despite our objections. My freedom, my fight, she said simply, her skin a determined crimson I hadn't seen before. We positioned ourselves in the narrow corridor leading from the main airlock, using equipment crates as partial barricades. The ship shuddered as Tenry's vessel made contact, magnetic clamps securing it to our hull. Security craft, 90 seconds to intercept, the AI informed us. Unauthorized boarding attempt detected at main airlock. The airlocks. External controls weren't designed to resist determined forced entry. Within moments, warning lights indicated the outer door had been compromised. The inner door, our last physical barrier, began its automatic lockdown protocol. He's overriding the safety interlocks, Meryl observed tensely. 30 seconds until the inner door can be breached. I raise my stunner, taking careful aim at the airlock. Stay behind cover. If he's armed, which is likely, don't take unnecessary risks. Edgefall security is hailing both vessels, Flip reported from her portable console, ordering immediate cessation of boarding action. But Tenry was beyond heeding such orders now. The airlock's inner door mechanism groaned as it was forced against its safety protocols. With a final metallic protest, it slid partially open, just enough for a figure to push through. Tenry stepped into the corridor, a compact energy weapon held before him. His face was flushed with exertion and determination bordering on fanaticism. Enough games, he snarled. Hand over the Vandal now, or I start shooting. This is over, Tenry, I called from behind our makeshift barricade. Edgefall security will be here in less than a minute. You've already committed enough crimes to guarantee detention. Don't make it worse. Worse? He laughed bitterly. I've lost my position, my reputation, everything I built over 20 years of service. All because of a thieving vandal and interfering scientists. What exactly do I have left to lose? The desperate edge in his voice sent a chill through me. He was a man with nothing left to lose, the most dangerous kind. Think, I urged. You could still walk away from this. Detach your ship now, and you might outrun the security response. Not without her, he insisted, taking another step forward. His weapon swung toward our position, targeting indiscriminately. Last chance. Before I could respond, Sedestra rose from behind the barricade, her skin a calm, determined blue. Stop, she said clearly. No more danger to them. Sedestra, no. Flip reached for her, but the vandal stepped easily out of reach. Found you at last, Tenry said, his weapon tracking to center on her chest. You've led me quite a chase. Why hunt so hard? Sedestra asked, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. Just one vandal. Why matter so much? Because your kind need to know your place, Tenry answered, his face twisting with long-harbored hatred. The moment you forget that, everything falls apart. Order. Hierarchy. The system that keeps civilization functioning. System that keeps some up, some down, Sedestra replied simply. Not civilization, just power. Her words struck with unexpected eloquence, momentarily leaving Tenri speechless. In that brief opening, I adjusted my aim, waiting for the right moment. It doesn't matter what you think, Tenri recovered, raising his weapon higher. You're coming with me now. She's not going anywhere with you. The new voice came from behind Tenri. He whirled to find two Edgefall security officers in the airlock entrance, their weapons trained on him. They had boarded through his own ship. Drop your weapon, the lead officer ordered. Immediately. For one terrible moment, I thought Tenri might choose violence over surrender. His finger tensed on the trigger, his face a mask of thwarted rage. Then, with a sound of pure frustration, he lowered the weapon and let it clatter to the deck. Tenri, former customs security officer of Confluence Station. The officer continued. You are being detained for unauthorized pursuit of a vessel outside your jurisdiction, weapons fire against a civilian craft, attempted forced boarding, and multiple violations of sector transit laws. As they secured him, Tenri fixed his gaze on Sedestra one last time. This isn't over. The system always wins in the end. Remember that, Vandal. Sedestra's skin rippled with colors too complex for me to interpret, but her words were clear. Systems change. People change them. With Tenri secured, the tension that had sustained us through the crisis finally released. Flip sagged against the bulkhead, while Meryl lowered herself onto one of the equipment crates. I felt my own legs trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. Sedestra moved among us, her skin shifting to gentle blues and purples that somehow conveyed comfort despite our linguistic barriers. All safe now, she said softly. Because of you, because chose to help, not harm. It was the right thing to do, Flip replied, echoing her earlier words with a tired smile. The Edgefall security officers returned after securing Tenri in their craft. We'll need statements from all of you, the lead officer informed us. But that can wait until we reach the outpost. Your ship has sustained damage. Can you maintain life support and minimal propulsion? We should be able to limp into Edgefall, Meryl confirmed after consulting the ship's diagnostic systems, though repairs will be substantial. We'll escort you in, the officer nodded. A full investigation will follow, but preliminary evidence suggests clear aggression on the part of the detained. Your defensive actions appear justified. As they departed to prepare for our journey to Edgefall, we gathered in the ship's common area, the need for rest and recovery finally asserting itself now that immediate danger had passed. What happens now? Sedestra asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between us. It was the same question we'd been avoiding since leaving Confluence. What was the long-term solution for Sedestra? Edgefall offered temporary safety, but as a research outpost, it provided no permanent resolution to her stateless status. We have options, Meryl said, surprising me with her decisiveness. While you were preparing our defenses, I contacted a colleague at Nova Haven. It's a frontier settlement beyond Confluence jurisdiction, more diverse, more open to those seeking new beginnings. You arranged passage? I asked, impressed by her foresight. She nodded. Contingent on our arrival at Edgefall, yes. There's a supply transport leaving 3 days after our scheduled arrival. They're willing to take an additional passenger, no questions asked. We'll be free there. Sedestra's skin rippled with cautious hope. As free as anyone can be on the frontier, Meryl answered honestly. It's not an easy life, but there's no Confluence authority, no Vandal registration requirements. You could build something for yourself. The colleague I mentioned runs a xenolinguistics program, Flip added. If you're interested, your knowledge of Vandal communication would be invaluable. Paid work, legitimate status as a research consultant. Sedestra's skin brightened to vibrant blues and purples. Would like that. Very much. I watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Relief that we'd found a potential path forward for Sedestra, pride in what we'd accomplished together, but also the sobering awareness of what it had cost and what challenges still lay ahead. We're not out of the woods yet, I cautioned. There will be questions at Edgefall, reports to file, possibly repercussions from confluence once they learn what happened. Let them come, Flip said with unexpected fierceness. We did nothing wrong. We protected a person from unjust treatment. Legally speaking, it's more complicated than that, Merrill noted, ever the pragmatist. But the consortium will back us if we frame it correctly. Scientific integrity, protection of a valuable research subject from unauthorized interference. Politics, I said with a wry smile, always comes down to the right language, doesn't it? Language shapes reality, Sedestra observed unexpectedly. This all Van'll know. Why colors speak as much as words. The simple wisdom in her statement struck me. In helping Sedestra, we had taken a stand against a system that used language, fugitive, illegal, undocumented, to justify treating beings as less than persons. By reframing her as research subject, then colleague, and now potentially consultant, we were using that same power of definition toward justice instead. 3 days to Edgefall, Flip said, checking the navigation console. We should rest while we can. It's been quite a day. As the others dispersed to their quarters, I remained for a moment with Sedestra in the common area. She seemed contemplative, her skin shifting through subtle patterns of blue and violet. Thank you, Ellis, she said simply. For first choice. At Docking Bay. Could have reported. Didn't. I shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude for what had seemed, in that moment, the only choice I could live with. Sometimes we find our principles in the moment we're tested by them. Her colors shifted to what I'd come to recognize as her equivalent of a smile. Wise words. We'll remember. As I headed to my quarters, I sent another brief message to my sister on Earth, even more circumspect than the last. Took scenic route. Made some unexpected friends. Still on track to help. Maybe slightly delayed. Her reply came as I was drifting into much-needed sleep. Always did have a talent for the scenic route. New treatments promising. Take your time. Do what's right. I'm not going anywhere. Those last words followed me into dreams. Do what's right. In a universe of complex politics, tangled jurisdictions, and competing interests, sometimes the simplest directive was the most powerful. Do what's right. We had, and would continue to whatever came next. The journey to Edgefall passed without further incident, our damaged ship limping along under escort. Tenry remained in Edgefall security custody, his fate to be determined by sector authorities rather than Confluence Station. A small but significant victory for impartiality. Upon arrival, we were met by a mix of security personnel and scientific administrators. The competing jurisdictions immediately apparent in their separate questioning and documentation. The investigation was thorough but fair, our status as respected researchers carrying considerable weight. Sedestra presented herself with dignity throughout, her improved command of common and willingness to explain Vandal culture and circumstances winning unexpected allies among the scientific community. By the second day, what had begun as an investigation into potential smuggling had transformed into a scholarly discussion about the ethical treatment of sentient species in Confluence jurisdiction. On our final evening before Sedestra's transport was scheduled to depart for Nova Haven, we gathered in our temporary quarters for a quiet celebration. To new beginnings, Flip proposed, raising a glass of Edgefall's local fermented beverage. And to principles worth defending, Merrill added, with a warmth I'd rarely seen from her. To freedom, Sedestra offered, her skin rippling with joyful patterns of blue and gold. I raised my own glass. To doing what's right, even when it's difficult. As the conversation flowed around me, I found myself reflecting on the strange path that had brought us here. A chance encounter at a docking bay, a decision made in a moment of moral clarity, and a journey that had tested our courage, our ingenuity, and our commitment to our principles. What will you do now? Sedestra asked me during a lull in the conversation. Continue with Flip and Merrill, I suppose, I answered. Once the ship is repaired. The pay is still good, and after this adventure, I doubt I'll find security work on any station in Confluence jurisdiction anyway. Could come to Nova Haven, she suggested, her skin patterns conveying what I interpreted as hopeful invitation. Need security there too. The idea was tempting. A fresh start in a place without the rigid hierarchies of confluence, where what we'd done would be seen as just rather than criminal. But my obligations remained unchanged. My sister, I explained simply. She needs the treatments only available on Earth. The consortium pay is reliable, and they have the connections to ensure the funds reach her quickly. Sedestra's colors shifted to understanding blues. Family important. Understand duty. Perhaps someday, I offered, when she's better or when I've saved enough. We'll wait, she replied. Nova Haven not going anywhere. The next morning, we accompanied Sedestra to the transport dock. The supply ship was rugged and utilitarian, a far cry from the scientific elegance of lofty ambitions, but it represented something more valuable, a path to genuine freedom. The captain, a weather-beaten human with the casual confidence of someone who operated beyond core jurisdiction, greeted us with minimal formality. Your passenger? He asked, gesturing to Sedestra. Yes, Merrill confirmed. As arranged with Dr. Voss. He nodded. Quarters are basic, but private. We reached Nova Haven in 6 days, standard. No questions asked, no answers needed. Thank you, Sedestra said, stepping forward. She had few possessions, just a small pack containing clothes and personal items we'd provided during our journey. Flip embraced her without hesitation. Remember to record your color patterns in different emotional states. Dr. Voss will be fascinated by the linguistic implications. Will do, Sedestra promised, her skin rippling with affectionate blues. Merrill offered a more reserved farewell, though her usual clinical demeanor had softened considerably. The documentation we prepared should establish your consultant status at Nova Haven. If there are any issues, have Dr. Voss contact us directly. Finally, Sedestra turned to me. Ellis human, she said, deliberately using the form I'd corrected multiple times, now clearly a term of affection. Remember promise. Someday, Nova Haven. I remember, I assured her. Take care of yourself, Sedestra. You've earned your freedom. Make the most of it. Her skin rippled with a complex pattern I'd never seen before. A swirl of blues, purples, and golds that seemed to convey emotions beyond translation. Then, with a final nod to all of us, she boarded the transport. We remained at the viewport as the ship detached from the dock and moved slowly away from Edgefall. Only when it had disappeared into the star-scattered blackness did we turn away, each caught in our own thoughts. So, Flip said finally, breaking the contemplative silence. What now? The ship repairs should be completed in 3 days, Merrill replied. The consortium has approved our adjusted research schedule, accounting for the delays. And the official report? I asked. Filed and accepted, she confirmed. The incident is recorded as unauthorized interference with licensed research activities, with no mention of Sedestra's initial status. Tenry remains in custody, awaiting transport to sector headquarters for trial. It was a neat resolution, cleaner than I'd dare hope for. The system had adjusted, found a way to accommodate our actions without acknowledging the deeper ethical questions they raised. Perhaps that was as much as we could expect. Our next research site is the Tau Ceti outpost, Flip noted. Lots of interesting linguistic diversity there. Life would go on. We would return to our work, to the routines and purposes that had defined us before Sedestra entered our lives. But something had changed in each of us and in our understanding of each other. We had taken a stand together, risked everything for principles that transcended regulations and jurisdictions. Whatever came next, that shared experience had forged a bond between us that would endure. As we made our way back to our temporary quarters, I found myself looking up at the star-filled sky visible through Edgefall's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, Sedestra was heading toward a new beginning. Somewhere else, Earth continued its ancient orbit, my sister waiting with her fragile hope. And here I was, in between, part of story still unfolding. You know, Flip said thoughtfully as she followed my gaze upward, I've been thinking about expanding our research focus. Perhaps a comparative study of how different species conceptualize freedom and personhood, expressed through their linguistic structures. Merrill raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like social advocacy disguised as research. The best kind. Flip grinned unrepentantly. Besides, after this experience, can you honestly say you're not interested? A slight smile tugged at Meryl's lips. I suppose it does have scientific merit and practical applications. Count me in, I added. Security work gets more interesting when you understand what you're actually securing and why. As we continued discussing possibilities, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond my original pragmatic goals. The universe was vast and often harsh, systems of power deeply entrenched. But change was possible, one decision, one person, one misdemeanor at a time. In helping Sedestra find her freedom, perhaps we had discovered something important about our own.